All right, everybody, I am back with a brand new update, and this video is obviously Star Wars centric. And I've been meaning to get back into doing Star Wars videos like I do DC and Rebel Moon and anything else I'm talking about. And there is certainly a lot of information that comes out about Star Wars, and I think I'm going to be covering more of those things in the future. And I've been meaning to do this video for a long time. And there was a comment that was made by the director of the new Rey movie yesterday that we're going to cover at the end of this video. But I believe that Star Wars is headed for the final nail in the coffin that is going to destroy the franchise for good. I think Disney is hell-bent on destroying everything they have in their bag. And Star Wars is no different. And you know, this is all going to go back to when Kathleen Kennedy said at one point that the Force is female. And she meant it. And they're making good on that statement. It is all about the females now. And we're going to look at some stuff. But first, I have some photos to show you. And I do want to talk about my feelings on Dave Filoni taking over as the main person down there at Disney. So we're going to go back quite a ways. And I'm going to share the stuff I've grabbed since my last update. All right, so the big news when I was going to do my last video was the fact that Dave Filoni was promoted down there at LucasArts. And I saw a ton of hate for this. And I will talk about what my feelings are on this situation. But it said in a new interview with Vanity Fair, Dave Filoni reveals that he has been made head of creative at Lucasfilm. And this was his quote. "Now I'm what's called Chief Creative Officer of Lucasfilm, which places him into the development process much earlier and in a much more expansive capacity than his previous advisory duties. In the past, in a lot of projects, I would be brought in and would see it after it had already been developed a good ways. Filoni will still have to report directly to Kathleen Kennedy for the foreseeable future." Now, my hopes is that this is going to be a way for them to eventually get rid of her and flush her out of there. But we're going to look at some other stuff here. And, you know, since my last update, too, we saw that South Park did this really funny parody on her where she did this thing and they made fun of Kathleen Kennedy. And you can actually go look for that online on YouTube. It's actually pretty funny. And everybody knows that she has destroyed Star Wars. People are tired of it, but it looks like Disney is going to continue with the nonsense, and we're going to see some of that here with the update. So it says, Dave Filoni will now oversee all Star Wars projects as Chief Creative Officer at Lucasfilm. All right, so let's talk about Dave Filoni. It looks like I did delete all of the photos that I had grabbed because I was going to give up on doing the Star Wars updates, but I think, like I said, I'm going to be getting back into it and saving those specifically for these updates. But let's talk about my feelings on Dave Filoni getting put into this position. Now, he came out and did say that he used to come into the process way later in the process, but he's going to be there from inception until its end going forward. Now, a lot of people online didn't like this, and I can kind of appreciate that because, I mean, he was in charge of a lot of the Ahsoka show, which ended up being all female driven. He did a decent job with what's there, but the problem with Filoni is he can get too much into the lore of what he's created with stuff like the show Rebels and with what he did with Ahsoka to the point where the general audience can no longer follow along with what's happening. And we saw that with the ending of Ahsoka with the different storylines that they started up, and even I had to watch a video to figure out what the crap was going on, you know, with the temple and the guy who had passed away, Reese Stevenson's character. And it was one of those things where I think they're going to lose the general audience because he wants to get into this deep lore of Star Wars that is way off the beaten path. Now, a lot of people hated him because they think he's just going to further the agenda because he was working on these projects under Kathleen Kennedy to begin with. He gives me a little bit of ray of hope in the fact that he was the number one guy beside Lucas when they created the Clone Wars. And he understands that world better than anybody working down there. And so I have hopes that he's going to be able to correct the ship. There is a possibility, but there's also a possibility that he could just continue on with the agenda, and that this is a stopgap measure to kind of try and correct the ship and make it perceive like they're trying to correct the ship, but not actually correct the ship. And I do believe with this next thing that I'm going to talk about that they are ready to destroy Star Wars for good. And it is all about females. Now, there is a Rey movie coming out. There are 3 films that Disney did announce for Star Wars at their last Star Wars big get-together, and one of those was a movie. One of them is actually going to be directed by Dave Filoni. He's going to be doing something that kind of ties up all of the Disney Plus shows all together. He's going to be doing a movie sometime in that time period. And there was another one. I don't remember the time period. I think they're going way back to the beginning of the Jedi. But we've also got the Rey movie, a standalone film. Now, some people think it's a trilogy. It's not a trilogy. It's going to be a standalone film where she's trying to rebuild the Jedi Order. So the Force being female, I think they're doubling down on what they're doing and they're losing the audience. Because I already talked about Ahsoka, and it was all female-driven. It was still a good show, but it was definitely all female-driven. And that was just the nature of that show, but it actually fit the storyline, which was better than some of the other stuff. But if you look at something like Obi-Wan, now, first of all, this was directed by Deborah Chow, and she did a decent job. Now, I think the lightsaber fight at the end of that show is my favorite lightsaber fight of anything Star Wars that's ever been done. But her direction overall was really not that good. I don't think she's a great director by any stretch of the imagination. And they gave Obi-Wan like the lowest budget out of any of the shows, and it should have had the highest budget. I mean, we're talking about a legacy character going into a time period that people want to dig their just dig into, and you give it a small budget, and you bring in this character that's never been in Star Wars before by the name of Reva, and you run with it. The show is almost more about Reva than it is Obi-Wan. You cannot do that in a situation like that. You had the whole prequel trilogy bringing Rey in, who Rey is definitely one of those characters that is certainly a Mary Sue. Now, I really liked The Force Awakens in the fact that it didn't tread new ground, but at least brought the feel of Star Wars back. And then we had the second film, which I think is a debacle, and I don't even consider that film even part of the canon anymore. I just skip it and move right to The Rise of Skywalker. But, Rey ends up becoming the big hero in this trilogy, and at the end, she takes on the name of Luke Skywalker. So she's now Rey Skywalker. So she's impersonating his name. I feel like she's stealing his name. I forget the term they call it. Stolen valor is how I look at that in regards to Star Wars. We also know that the Acolyte show is all going to be about females at the early time of the Jedi and the Sith. And so Disney is hell-bent on making it all female-driven. All of it. All of it. And which is unfortunate because it's not just all about females. And we're going to look at the news that came out yesterday. And then I've got an analogy, and I use the same analogy when I talked about the Marvels film. But I'm going to use an analogy of what my feelings are on this director and her comments. So let's take a look at these comments, what she said, and what she has said in the past. And then I'm going to give you that analogy and talk about what this is going to do to Star Wars. All right, so let's take a look at the news from this Star Wars director who is doing the Daisy Ridley movie. Her name is Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. She is teasing a very special Daisy Ridley Star Wars film. She goes, I am very thrilled about the project because I feel what we're about to create is something very special. And I really hope it is. Daisy Ridley has also said that the script surprised even her. Now, I will judge this movie based on its merits when it actually gets released. I will put aside that Disney made it. I will put aside that it is directed by a female because, honestly, I don't care if a female directs a movie. In fact, one of my top out of my top 10 films, my fourth favorite film of all time is a movie called Point Break, which is an action film that was actually directed by a female, Catherine Bigelow. She did an incredible job doing that movie. And to this day, I absolutely love it. It was the last film I watched last year. And I'm actually going to do a review on the 4K at some point soon. So I have no problem with the female directing stuff, but it's this next problem that I have an issue with. Star Wars director Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy says it's about time a woman shaped a Star Wars film. What does it matter? What this tells me is that this person is pushing an agenda, and that's what they really care about. That the story is secondary or even worse. And my question about this individual would be, do they even know anything about Star Wars? There should be a test people have to take to direct a Star Wars film. And does she even know or even care about Star Wars? That is my big question. I want to know that she's the right person for the job, because these comments make it seem like she's not. And I'm going to talk about what I liken this to. So I liken this to, being a young boy who has a bunch of toys. You have your Transformers, you have your G.I. Joes, your Thundercats, your Voltron toys, all of it. When you get called outside to do a chore, and by your parents, when you come back inside, you find out that your little sister has hijacked your toys and is doing a tea party and doing musical numbers with your toys. She doesn't really care about your toys. All she is doing is trying to bug the crap out of her older sister or her older brother and play in the sandbox. But she doesn't really care. That's what this is. That's what these comments by the director of the Rey movie actually sound like. And she's actually made comments in the past. I actually saw the video where she says she loves making men feel uncomfortable. That is not the person I want directing Star Wars. When that's what they care about, it's gender-driven, and this is Disney. They keep saying that they understand that they've made mistakes, yet they keep doing stuff like this time and time and time again. This could be the final nail in the coffin that ultimately destroys Star Wars for good. They have tarnished Star Wars. This could be the end of everything. I'm hoping the movie's good, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope, especially with comments like this. All right, so what do you guys think about these recent developments with Star Wars? I would love to hear your thoughts. Star Wars on the rank of things. I love Indiana Jones, then Star Wars, DC's third. DC's easiest to talk about because of all of the news, but I do like Star Wars and Indiana Jones more than I do DC stuff. And so I am going to try to do these updates on a regular basis for you guys. So give me your thoughts below, and I will see you guys on the next update.